Welcome back, everyone, to EdUp Edge, where we get the opportunity to talk about all things career education, leadership, and life hacks. So, today is going to be a lot of fun because we are going to be sharing our stories about admissions. Okay. We're going to be talking about what we absolutely love about admissions, the fun times, but we're also going to be talking about nightmares and some of the challenges that we faced as admissions gurus. I feel like sometimes we always paint that picture of how amazing admissions is, right? But no one is talking about the dark side or some of the challenges. And this is why sometimes when you hire people, a couple of weeks later, they're like, yeah, no, thank you. So we are going to be giving you the tea. So to help me walk through this topic, of course, I had to bring on an OG. So we have Sarah Holmes. She is the senior account executive with Advanced 360 Education and a fellow admissions trainer. Hey,
Uh,
Sarah.
Kat, thank you so much for having me. I'm like, how are we just now connecting?
I
We
can't understand.
we have been like running a parallel worlds and now they finally collided.
It's so funny. It's just the other day I checked LinkedIn and I'm like, there's no way. Why is there a connect button there? How are we not connected at all?
Right. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. I love your podcast. I love
Thank
everything you
you.
talk about. We are so aligned. And I feel like it's just going to be like girlfriends having coffee and just chatting it up and,
Absolutely.
a few little horror stories, but some good takeaways too.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Sarah, you can go first. So talk to us about how did you get into higher ed?
I literally fell into higher education. I was doing sales and marketing for hotels and resorts and spas. And I had a girlfriend who moved over to a school, and she's like, it's so much fun. Come work in admissions. You can talk to people all day about like joining a career they love. And I was like, I'll give it a try. Why not? So I went over there, kind of thinking it would just be like an in between, like a placeholder for me to find my next big come up, and I
Ah.
ended up staying there for almost 13 years, Kat.
Wow. And you know what? They always say once you end up in admissions, it doesn't matter what you do after, you will always be admissions at heart.
What's the song? You could check out, but you'll never leave or something?
Exactly. But what's funny is you thought that you were going to be passing through.
I did. I really did. I thought I had no idea that this was like a sales job. And I think that speaks
Mm.
to a lot of people who come into admissions. I thought that a bus would drive up, would drop off a bunch of people who wanted to enroll in school, and I would just sit there and show them this is pretty, this is cute, this is what you'll learn. And I was like, sounds easy.
Mhm. That is funny. You know what's funny? Because I actually came from outdoor sales.
Okay.
So I told you my story about DeVry, but after they told me to go get some experience before I get into admissions, I was doing outdoor sales. So I was walking door to door selling office supplies. Okay. I
Wow.
must have seen like 100+ doors per day. But I knew what the admissions role was going to be because I was the career student. You
Sure.
know, I started off in traditional college and I was like, this is boring. I have a short attention span. And then I skipped on over.
I didn't know that, Cat. Same. So
Seriously?
I was told I had to go to real school and get a degree. So while
Yep.
I was in real school, I also went to a trade school and did both. And
Wow.
to this day, it's my trade school, it's my certificate, it was all of that got me to where I am today.
That's interesting. Maybe that's why we're so passionate about admissions because we've been on the other side. And I've seen it all. I've seen it from advisors who you could clearly tell they could really care less. They're just here for the
Uh-huh.
paycheck. And we know
Right.
admissions is not a 9 to 5, right?
No.
But then I've seen the other side where you have advisors who go the extra mile, like my advisor who called up the SAT board and was like, hey, my daughter needs to get in,
Ugh.
and that's how I was able to start school. And so I think that real, like the admissions advisors who are deeply rooted, it comes from a different place,
It does. It does.
you know?
You have to have sat kind of across the desk, right? With
Mhm.
a parent next to me who was like, No, like real school, real school. And I still tell my mom to this day, I'm like, that real college, like,
That is funny. So, what are some of the best memories that you had,
ugh.
growing up in admissions?
Oh, so I am such an empath. So I would sit across the desk from people and hear their life stories. And some of the best for me were where people would come in and they'd say, no one in my life supports this, whether
Mhm.
it was like a spouse or a parent or a friend, nobody supports this, but this is what I really want. And I was like their cheerleader. I didn't talk them into there was nothing going on there. I was just their cheerleader. And then for them to come back, or I see them at graduation, and then they tell me what they're doing. I have one story, a gal who came in and she was homeless. She was living in her car and she really wanted to do this, wanted to go to school. A lot of schools wouldn't give her a chance. Graduation, she did great. 2 years later, I got a letter from her and a picture of her on a stage. She became a huge platform artist for a very well-known brand.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. And you know what? It's always those kids who get discounted, right? You went
yeah,
through certain circumstances and everyone puts you into this box. I remember seeing students come in with shopping bags full of clothes because they live in a shelter, and not even a family shelter where you may have a room. I
sure,
mean a shelter where it's like you got to get online every single day and pray that you have a bed.
right.
And sometimes we're really quick to be like, how are you going to do this? But if they have it in them, if they're
Right,
confident, why we can't be
right.
confident for these students either?
Right, right. When I do training, Cat, I
Hmm.
talk to a lot of admissions reps about don't point out the negative. Like they already know that. Don't you think driving here
Yeah.
or riding the bus here, they went over and over that in their
Yeah.
head? Like, like they know it's going to be hard. We don't have to remind them.
Hmm. That's interesting. I remember one of my success stories. It was this girl, and I know sometimes when you come from like the West Indies, or because I'm from Barbados, right?
Oh,
So we're raised where it's like everything is strict, right? But I had this girl, she was actually from Nigeria,
okay.
and she came in, and her whole thing was, my mom is not going to go for this when we got
Mm,
to the tuition, right? She's like, she's not going for this. She's really strict. Trust me, I'm just going to have to find another school. And I'm like, wait a minute. You didn't even give yourself an opportunity. And so I
oh,
said, look, have you ever expressed any of this to your mom? She's like, no. I'm like, well, maybe today's the day to start. So I said, word for word, this is what you say when you go home. The worst she can say is absolutely not. I don't want you to go into healthcare as a medical assistant program.
mhm.
I'm not taking out this thing that these people call FAFSA or financial aid. Because, a lot of parents, they're like, why do you need my ID?
Right. What's a FOFSA? You're like,
Why do you need my license? What information are you trying to steal? It's
sure.
so funny. But she went home and she's like, most likely I'm never going to see you again, but I'm going to repeat what you said. She came back the next day unannounced because she wasn't to be back because she disappeared. And she's like, I told my mom what you told me to say. And she was so excited. Not only is she's going to apply for the financial aid, but she's not going to take out the Parent Plus loan because she's going to pay the rest in full. I was shocked myself because I had just started. She was like my second student. And I'm like,
Oh, I love
what?
that.
And this girl went from the very beginning all the way to the end, graduated, became a medical assistant for a few years, went on and pursued her, goal in modeling. And she was actually one of my podcast guests in my first season.
That is a beautiful story.
That was in 2007, Sarah.
Kat, let's go back though to the beginning of that story. You
Mhm.
said that she said, "Oh, my mom's never going to go for it."
Yep.
A lot of reps would have just stopped then and been like, "Oh,
That's it.
bye, next." That is why you are so good at what you do, because it wasn't that you took no for an answer, but it wasn't like she was just a number and you just were meeting a quota and you were going. You went that extra step and it paid off.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is what we tell advisors all the time when we're
Yep.
training, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to take one student at a time. And I listen to calls all the time. And I feel like they're talking to the same person with every call. And I'm like, I know those are different calls that you're making. Why does your conversation sound exactly the same?
Right. Right. Right,
You
right,
know?
or right, and then they're like, "We're struggling with getting ghosted or people no showing to their interview appointment," and it's like, "Well, because they were just a number. You didn't build rapport with them. You didn't
Yeah.
connect with them, and that is so important."
Yeah. But you know what? Here's the thing. Can we blame all advisors? I came into a doggy dog world of admissions where there were 21 or 22 other advisors. Okay. Number one, I was the youngest in the department. I was a female, so it was male dominated, right?
Mhm.
But
Sure.
then I was the only one out of the 22 who has never worked in higher ed before. So I came in as like the underdog, right? So everyone is looking at me to fail, right? Because they're like, oh, she doesn't know anything about higher ed. And I know in career education at that time, used to get sent away for a week of relaxation, like the top 30 of the
The
campus. I worked for
cruise.
the exactly. I worked for a career education corporation. So Sanford Brown at that time, they had like 40 plus campuses,
Ugh.
right? But the pressure on advisors to
Mhm,
meet
mhm,
expectations,
mhm.
sometimes it gets to the point where they're like, you know what, I don't have time to think about people
Right,
because I'm not
right,
trying to get fired. I'm not trying to get on the back of that line,
right.
tomorrow. So it's kind of like 50-50
They're doing what they're doing to stay alive, right? They're doing to and so where does that come from, Kat?
leadership.
Yep. 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 You can't have it both ways. You can't have putting so much pressure and roll and roll and roll, hit this goal, but then also wanting students who are going to start what I call sticky, the ones that start, and then
Hmm.
the ones that graduate and the ones that we can place. Like,
Yeah. What are some of the things that you kind of cringed at when you were in admissions?
um,
You're like, let me pull out my scroll.
yeah, exactly. I mean, one time I had a director that he sat across the desk from me and he's like, do whatever it takes to hit this goal,
Wow.
whatever. And I'm like,
Wow.
whatever it takes,
Are you
whatever.
sure?
Right, right. Like I ain't going down for nobody, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy because career education, career schools have been under scrutiny for a very long time, right? But at the same time, there were some schools that really spoiled the batch for everyone.
Sure.
Because I remember back in the days, advisors and leaders paying application fees. It's like, oop, you dropped that $50 bill, and I'm sitting there like, is this really happening? So there you go with by any means
Right.
necessary,
Necessary. Yeah,
but
absolutely.
unfortunately the student gets hurt in the end.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I was consulting, this was, 100 years ago with a school, and I slipped upon the fact that they were helping with entrance exams.
The leadership staff taking the exam for the students.
Mm, yeah. I was just like, this is not okay. And I was very vocal about it. And it's just sad because to your point, there's so much we are under a microscope,
Yeah.
and the majority of us are doing amazing things and we want to help students. We do. We
Mhm.
want to see them succeed. This is not just a job. This is
It's
like,
not.
right?
It's really not. How did you feel about the phones? Did you like the phones?
I did.
You
I
did?
I did, I know. I did. I'm just a chatty person.
Uh-huh.
Like, in my past life, I also tried to be an esthetician and do, like, facials, but everyone would tell me, "Sarah, you give a great facial, but you talk too much, and it's not relaxing."
Wait a minute. Were you the advisor that they had to pull out of the the interview room? Like they're walking past and they're
Yes,
like,
in the beginning, I was like, "Well, I have this new best friend, and we're da da da, and I know her whole life story," and then I quickly learned, okay,
Mhm.
You got to put up the boundaries. You can't get in the hole with them. You have to bring them out of the hole, because I would go home every day like in tears, Kat, over the stories I would hear. It
I
would
get it.
affect me so much.
I get it. But you know what? It's a curse, but at the same time, it shows how committed you are to the role. Like I always tell advisors, I'm like, some of the stories that you hear throughout the day, if you don't think about this at night, are
Right.
you really shutting that off? I mean,
Right.
it's good to shut
Right.
work off when it's
Right.
the ending of the day, but if you're
Right.
really invested in something,
Right.
there's some stories that's going to sit with you and you're going to think about those students hours later.
Mm-hmm.
I hate dials. I hated them.
Do you?
I am very introverted.
You are?
Yeah, people
No,
always
you're
say
not.
that.
Stop.
Definitely. Sarah, I am so introverted. I do not like talking on the phone at all. My husband gets on me about this all the time because he feels the need to call me every hour.
You're like,
And
text me, babe.
when we first started dating, he will call, I will look at the phone ring, and then I'll text him back, "Hey, did I just miss your call?" And he's like, "I know you just saw that call come through."
Right.
I'm still like that. I am just very introverted. I never liked the phones, but I think a lot of it had to do with the rejection also. And I
Yeah.
think that's what advisors still struggle with today.
It is that is so true, because it does affect you to hear no 90 times and yes only 10 times, right? It does affect you. You start to like question, like, am I where I need to be? Like, what's my
Exactly.
purpose?
Exactly. I need to start over. Oh my gosh, what are some other things that you actually faced as an advisor where it made you really nervous to go into work the next day?
I think what always made me nervous were the parents.
You know what's funny? That's one major thing that advisors are always like, I don't know how to talk to the parents.
Mhm,
What do
mhm.
I say to them? How did you actually overcome that?
So I had such a hard time balancing. We need the parents' buy-in, but this is the student's journey. So I can't just talk to the parent, because if I am, the student doesn't feel like they're a part of this, and then they're not going to
Mhm.
want to do this anymore. But if I just talk to the student, the parent, so I felt like I was like juggling, like,
Uh-huh.
da, da, over here. And I struggled with that because I always knew this was the student's life and the student's journey. But if they didn't get this person to hop on board, it would never happen. Mm. So I think I just overcame it just by being authentic and being honest,
Mhm.
and explaining, like, at the time when I struggled with this, I didn't have kids. So I would say that, I don't have children, so I don't know what it's like sitting across the desk, but I can only imagine when I do have kids how scary and exciting this time could be. So I'm just going to answer questions and hopefully make you feel more comfortable about the decision that your student is making.
Yeah, you have kids now?
I do. I have a daughter and she's 10, and I totally get it now.
Let me tell you. Remember I told you that my son was now starting pre-K.
How did
Okay.
first week go?
Oh, first of all, it's like mom doesn't even exist.
Oh, good. I mean,
I mean,
not
it's a
good,
good
but you know
thing,
what I
but
mean.
I'm like the nerve. But I think what helped is that my husband was home the first and the second day. So he helped keep me distracted. But the third day, I was sitting in the parking lot and I'm like,
Sure.
and my son is like, I'm sorry, who are you again? But it's funny because now that you say that, every single day this week, I've walked in and I had 10 questions
Yeah.
for everyone. And when
Yeah.
we're advisors and we don't have kids, we're like, oh my gosh, like
Right.
back off, mom. Like I'm
So
trying to do my
cringe.
job. And now I'm walking into school and I'm like, am I really annoying them? Like you don't know what they're thinking in their mind, but I'm like,
Right.
hey, I have about 6 questions for
Right.
you. And so maybe we should do a training on that because talking to advisors, they're always like, I'm very intimidated talking to parents. I
Mhm.
don't know what to say. I don't know how to address them. Some of them are like, I'm just afraid of the mom and
Right.
dad.
Right.
So
Yeah,
maybe that's something that
absolutely.
we can do next. I think that's going to be
I love
helpful.
that, Kat. One of my early learnings was to invite a parent or a decision maker to the appointment. And I'm being honest here. I did not do that. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want them to come. Like, that just opens a whole new can of worms. But when I
Yeah.
adopted that, And I started to, I'm like, oh, they were right all along. I should
It
have been doing
made the process go so quickly.
it.
I think what
Yes.
made me nervous was when it came to the class start and students disappearing. Okay,
Mhm.
here's the thing. I started averaging 3 to 4 enrollments every single day when I first started. No
You
one
were,
was starting. It was beautiful on
oh,
the front end. No one was
oh,
starting. And
okay.
I remember my director came to me and he's like, Kat, you know what? You're doing an amazing job on the front end, but your students are not following through with financial aid. My response was, isn't that financial aid's job? I still hear advisors say that today. But from the time I understood how critical
Hmm.
students getting through that financial aid process was, now my start rates started to increase.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, I'm like, I'm not understanding your statement. Okay, financial aid is financial aid. I
Right.
enrolled, you package them. But it's like every piece has to work together, but you still get that anxiety leading up to the first day of class because emergencies happen and people disappear.
Life happens. It does. And
Mhm.
they'll come back. Kind of on that note, like a pet peeve of mine, whether I'm overseeing an admissions team or I'm consulting, is when the advisors say they're adults. They should have to get their diploma on their own or find their ID or do their FAFSA application. They're adults. And it's like, yeah, I get that, but you're not going to change
Yeah,
the generation. You're not going to change them. So embrace it and be helpful or you're not going to get the enrollment. Like we're not going to change this whole entire generation because you think that they should be old enough to locate documents.
yeah,
Would you agree?
yeah, absolutely. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is when it comes to the older population, they haven't been in school in so long. So
Right.
sometimes they look at the FAFSA and they're like, what does this even mean? And you have advisors saying, you're an adult, figure it out. But if they don't understand that language, guess what? Most
Right.
students go, you know what? Maybe this is a sign. It wasn't meant to be. And then all of a sudden, they just ghost the advisors.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
You got to hold
Absolutely.
these people's hands.
You do. Now more than ever, Kat, because as you know, all the changes to the FAFSA application this
Yeah.
year have really shook not only financial aid advisors, but students and all the updates and how you have to do separate logins, all that. So shout out to anyone listening on admissions, check into the changes. If you're not aware of them, marketing, if you're not aware of the changes with the financial aid application, get aware real quick.
Like yesterday. And this is why cross training is so important. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. You would be surprised how many advisors today you would ask, do you understand how financial aid works? And they're like, no. Some of
Ooh.
them say my director doesn't want me to actually communicate with financial aid. And I'm still like, are
What
2024? I'm sorry.
what are we
What do you
hiding then
mean?
if it's that big of a secret?
What do you mean? You'd be surprised. Some schools are so separated.
Yeah.
Okay, I there was a school that I was consulting a few years ago, and they do not want admissions talking to anyone after the enrollment. After the class starts, they're not allowed to talk to the student ever again. The advisor has this story. When week 2 comes and the instructor has no idea where the student disappeared to, you should always be able to go back to your advisor because they know why that student disappeared 9 out of 10. How do you not want admissions to communicate with anyone because you want them on the phone all the time, just dialing and enrolling?
Right. But
This
they
is
don't
why
know.
schools are so separated.
Yes. So, as you know, Kat, I work for a marketing company and we
Yeah.
do marketing specifically for higher
Mhm.
ed, universities, career schools. And one of the things that I love to do is I ask them when we're doing their strategy calls, when we're looking at what kind of ads we're running, invite your admissions team on the call. I want to hear what they're saying about lead quality. I want to hear about like their best fit student. I want to hear all that from them because then we can work more efficiently for them and drive them quality leads. And
Mhm.
sometimes when I get on with schools, they're like, oh, admissions and marketing together. I'm like, yeah, probably should have been doing that a while ago.
Exactly. This is what causes so much stress in admissions because
Yeah.
everyone feels that admissions is always complaining about everything just because they can't figure out how to meet expectations, right? So, yes, there are some advisors who, they finger point.
Sure.
because they're really not trying. But then you have others who are really passionate about the role, they understand. But the bottom line is, yes, sometimes it is the lead flow. So how can we fix that if admissions does not communicate with marketing to let them know, hey, this these type of leads over here, they're not converting at all. The left hand has to know what the right hand is doing.
Yes, I wanna talk to the people answering the phones,
Mhm.
really in the weeds on what is going on. It is so oh, you're so right.
So talk to us about some of the things that, advanced 360 education does for schools.
Yeah. So I think what really sets us apart, which I love, is our data and how Kat, if you were a director of marketing for, Kat's career college, you could come to me and say, Sarah, I'm noticing through all my data, through my CRM, that my best fit students are between this age, this demographic, have this interest. Take that information and serve your admissions team quality leads. So I am all about like I'm not into sending reps, hundreds of leads that they have to sift through just to keep them busy. No. Like I want to send you 100 leads that convert at 20% over 500 leads that convert at 5%. So, because we have so many people on our team who've worked in financial aid, compliance, admissions, marketing in
Love
schools,
it.
we get it. So, we're full circle.
I love that. You know why? Because there's so many marketing companies out there who've never done higher
I know.
education.
I
So it's a
know.
little different.
They
You
don't
can't necessarily apply the same techniques to every single industry. Education is
know.
very different. And I absolutely love the fact that your team is actually comprised of people from different levels in
Yes,
education. So
yes,
everyone can come together and say, hey, when I was working in this department, this is how I felt. So
yep,
this
yep,
is what we
yep.
actually need to do.
Yes. We know all about compliance and what we can say in ads and what we can't. So when we're sending over ads for the schools to approve, they don't have to dig deep and see.
Start from scratch.
It's right. It's nice, and we get so many people involved, and I'm all about conversion rates for admissions because I feel like, and Kat, I know you will agree with me, when your admissions team is successful, they feel good. When you feel good about yourself, you're going to do better, right?
Exactly. And it makes you want to actually work harder. Because the
Yes.
bottom line is people like to hear, great job. Wow, you've
Right,
improved.
right.
And there's even some leaders out there who are like, no, self motivate yourself. Okay, I get it. You have to have some level of self motivation, but people enjoy being acknowledged for their hard work.
They do.
And this is
They
how
do.
you lose
Yeah.
employees.
Right, right.
You know, talking about conversions, how do you feel about an advisor actually understanding their conversions? I ask that because there's some schools who are 100% against it and they're like, why do they need to know that? I need them to concentrate on this. This is for like the campus president. They
Mm.
need to know that stuff, or the DOA. How do you feel about the advisors actually being privy to conversions and how they
I
work?
think it's so important. I think a lot don't. When I bring up conversion rate,
They're
when
like,
I'm doing trainings, they're like, "Wait, what? What does that mean?" I
what's the
think
conversion?
right, like, what? Even for myself personally, I would pull reports from my personal conversion rates, lead to app to, financial aid to start, because where it was low, I could see where I needed to do better on.
Hello.
Right. It
I,
tells a story.
I've been saying that for the longest. I think that there's a huge gap where it comes to an advisor being able to manage their own expectations. And that's because they don't understand their own conversions, because you just want them to dial, dial, dial. Admissions is one area where you can manage your expectations so easily. If you know what your conversions are supposed to be, you could easily work yourself backwards and say,
Yep.
whoa, 26% appointment show.
Yep.
Hey, director, can you send me a couple of my calls so I can listen to them? I need to know where I'm going wrong.
Yes.
Everybody's moving so quickly and everyone is thinking about the next enrollment and the next start, but that nobody is thinking, I can actually make my job easier if I teach you how to convert on your own. So now a director can say, all right, I only really need to jump in when your numbers are like atrocious, like embarrassing. But you
Right.
know how to do this. A leader should be able to just tweak.
Mhm.
And when you're not doing that, this is where you get into micromanaging, but you're micromanaging because your team doesn't know how to do anything on their own. So
Right.
this is why you have to keep stepping in.
Right, you do. Kat, did we just become best friends?
Yeah,
I
I
feel like
think
we
so.
did.
I think so.
And to that point to that point, it's like the admissions teams will say like, "Well, the leads aren't, the lead didn't answer." And it's like,
Mhm.
reminder, they filled out a form, an RFI. They're interested, you just didn't speak to them in the language that they love. There was no what was the call to action? What was the excitement there?
Yeah,
Big
yeah.
fan of conversion rates.
Exactly. One thing advisors don't understand also is people are busy. You're busy, they're busy too. And I think sometimes they throw in the towel too soon. And after like 4 calls, they're not interesting. They're not interested. They're ghosting me. And I remember, I think years ago, I was trying to get insurance from this company, and I reached out to them, but every single time they called me, it was the wrong time. I was either in the middle of a project, and I
Right.
can hear on the answering service who was calling. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't answer right now. It must have taken 14 days. And finally, that 14th day, I ran to the phone and I'm like, thank you that you did not stop calling, because it
Yes.
was just the wrong time. And I was
Mhm.
like, wait a minute, your follow up process is actually really amazing.
You are so true, Kat. I love that you hit on that. Don't give up. And we see it, right? We see
Yeah.
schools that are like, oh no, 5 days disqualified or not
5
interested. No,
days.
to your point, life happens. The dog gets sick, the kid gets sick, this happens. Life happens to everybody.
Yeah. Do you have a horror story from any of your times in higher ed? I'll start with mine.
Start with yours because I'm trying to I think I've blocked some out, but let me bring them back.
It's some stories that just stick to you, right? I remember before I got promoted out to be an enrollment manager, there was one time where they were just cutting people. They cut every team by like 50% at every single campus. And remember, we had a team, by this time, we had about probably 18 people.
Mhm.
I saw about 8 of my colleagues get walked out the building within 20 minutes. We
Oh,
had like tri cubes. So it's like 3 of us in the cubicle so you can see over to the other section. And I would never forget, my DOA walked around because he didn't want to disturb, everyone else. And he'll just tap them on the shoulder and go like this. And then you see the person come back with their box, like crying. And then he'll come back and tap another person. Within 20 minutes, 8 people were gone. And I remember he came to me, which I did not think was funny at all. He tapped me on my shoulder. I said, I'm not going anywhere. When you go tell me what you have to tell me right here. And then, he was like, no, I'm just joking. I was like, that is not funny. I just saw 8 people being walked out the building. And then the second time was when Career Education Corporation shut down permanently. I was a DOA at this time. I had to walk my team out the door. All of this happened within 5 minutes. And this is why I tell schools, you have to understand how critical it is for your teams to understand what they're doing. Unless you've been through a teach out and you had to walk your team out the door, training is critical. Making sure that these advisors understand their roles. The
yeah,
closing of these institutions is horrific.
it is. It is. Oh, I'm so sorry that that sticks with you for sure.
Absolutely.
My story is kind of similar. Um,
Uh-huh.
a local school closed down very close that offered the same offerings that our school did, and we heard about it, but it was very abrupt, like a sign on the door. And we heard about it, and we thought, okay, maybe we'll get a few people coming over here.
Yeah.
The next day, we had hundreds of people, and at the time, I only had 3 advisors at this specific campus. We had hundreds of people in the school, waiting outside the school, in tears, upset,
Oh my
wanting to
God.
talk to us. My team, bless them, we were there until after midnight, talking to each individual, The horror part of this was what they were telling me, that they didn't have a high school diploma, but they have this piece of paper that said school gave them, and will this work here? They didn't do, they did the financial aid, but they said this so they could get more, as the advisor told them to do. So not only were they out of a school, but I couldn't help them, Kat. I would help them as far as help them get into a GED program
Mhm.
and understand the FAFSA and work with my
Yeah,
financial aid team. But it was story after story of I could not lawfully enroll them. The
that's
tears
sad.
and the anger and how they were taken advantage of just was my probably like lowest. So it was it a horror
Yeah.
story? Yeah, but it was like my lowest point. And this was maybe 2010-ish.
Mm.
And that really made me like evaluate everything. And then I was like, you know what? No, because there is a lot of good out there.
Oh man, that
Yeah,
is tough.
it
That's
was.
tough. I mean, some schools they put themselves first before the student, and they don't
So gross.
realize that their actions can be very detrimental to people in their lives. I mean, some people. I always tell advisors, you're the last key in a lot of cases for these students. They don't have anyone else. Now, imagine a school goes and does this to these same people. What do they do now?
Right. Right.
You know,
Nothing, nothing good.
It's sad. So, what advice can we actually offer to leaders? Number one, to lift some of the anxiety off of their advisors so
Mhm.
they don't continue to go down that road of I just need to get my number.
Mm. Sit, spend a day, shadow an advisor, see how often
Mhm.
they're smiling and dialing, picking up that phone and hearing no, hearing buzz off, not getting answered. Hear how hard they have to work to get one interview scheduled. Understand that if you've never been in admissions. That would be my biggest thing. Also, understand what's going on with financial aid. We touched on that a little bit earlier. That's a challenge, and it's
Mhm.
affecting all departments. But I to me, Kat, you hit it right on the head earlier when you said get admissions involved with every department.
Mhm.
They're
Yeah.
like the gatekeepers that we hold all the answers and this and the secrets and what people are saying. Just ask us. We're more than happy to share. Don't put us in the closet in the back, right?
Yeah. It's like, I need you to stay in this room and just enroll. Do
Yes,
not come out unless
yes,
you have to use the bathroom.
yes.
I think training like what we do is very critical too. I know back in the day, there's a lot of advisors who don't embrace admissions training, right?
I
And
do.
I remember I was talking to Brian Maggio, right? He's
Oh,
amazing.
I love Brian.
He is awesome. And I remember he said something, one line, and I said, wow, light bulb. He said, most advisors do not embrace training because they don't think they're the problem. It's everyone else. It's marketing, it's the instructors, it's financial aid, it's my dog, it's my mom, the
Right.
train that got here late today. It's never them. So it's kind of like now when it's time to, help you to improve your skills, is like, but I didn't do anything wrong. Do I suck? Is that why I need to train?
Mhm.
And it's like, no, in every industry, training is something that is ongoing. And I know for us, training was a punishment. Back
Right,
in the day, it was
right.
a punishment. So if you were on that training call, your friends were looking at you like, "Ooh, you on the call this week? Ooh, see you after lunch."
Right. Can't wait to hear what you did wrong.
Exactly. And I think that's a big problem. We have to figure out a way to get advisors to understand that trainers are your partners.
Mhm.
They're not
Absolutely.
there because you did
No,
such a terrible job. We need you to
no,
start over. No, it's
no,
just support.
no. We want to see them do better because then that makes them successful, which makes us successful, right? But
Mhm.
Kat, shout out to us trainers who literally walk into a building
Hello.
with 20 people who are like, mm,
The
oh,
faces. So I just Zoom because I'm in New York. But when you log on to some of these trainings and they're like,
mhm,
what
right,
are you going to teach me
right,
that the last three? And it's like,
right.
oh gosh, here we go.
Speaking of horror story, I had one lady tell me,
Uh-huh.
"I've been doing admissions longer than you've been alive." And I was like, "Oh,
Yikes.
I was like,
Like,
well, we can all learn. Maybe I'll learn something from
well,
you.
that's a good comeback.
Right? I was like, oh, this is painful.
Training it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of work, especially when you have teams who feel like there's nothing else for them to learn.
Yeah.
You know, like, who are you and what different can you bring to the table? I mean, her telling you that she's been in admissions longer than you've been alive. Hello. So yes, kudos to us because it's not an easy job, but we do it because we absolutely love to see people go, aha,
Yeah.
I get it now.
Yes. Such a
It,
good feeling.
absolutely. For leaders, I would say make sure that you're conducting those one-on-ones every week. There's leaders who don't even know if there's members on their team who has kids or are married. You don't have to go deep into someone's life, but I mean, really simple stuff you should know, especially if you've been managing them for over a year. Like,
At
you don't
least
know if someone
pretend
has
to be
a child.
interested, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
And empathy is one of the biggest
Mhm.
characteristics that's missing in
Yeah.
leadership.
Yeah.
And then
My
we wonder why advisors are always depressed.
right. I could tell you my last team that I oversaw, I could tell you their kids' names and their ages and stuff
Yeah.
because to your point, like I did truly care. I wasn't pretending. I did
Yeah.
truly care. And that team worked so hard for me and for us.
Because they trust you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you think about a true leader, they're leading a team who show up because they want to,
Yeah.
not because they absolutely need to. Everyone needs to work, but the
Sure.
ones who actually, they embrace their leaders because they know that their leader has their best interests at hand, those are the best teams because they're going to go over and beyond for you.
Absolutely.
And they're always going to have your back. Admissions is difficult, but it doesn't have to be if you have the right mix of people. Your team needs to be evenly yoked.
Well said.
Oh my gosh. Sarah, I loved our conversation. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Kat, you're amazing.
Thank
Everything you
you.
do, I've listened to all your podcasts. I think you're amazing. I'm so glad that you had me on. I'm honored and keep doing what you're doing. You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you know what, Sarah, it's definitely been an honor. And I remember when you appeared on Jen's last webinar, that's when I was like, hold on for a second. Who is this Sarah Holmes and why don't I know her?
Yes. Now we just have so much in common and
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so listen up, guys. Number one, I hope that you took tons of notes because we gave you a lot of gems that you can use with your team. Secondly, watch out for that training session because we are coming back to do that training that we discussed earlier. I mean, it's one area that can always continue to grow your teams. They want to win. They just
yes,
need the support from you as leaders, and we have your back.
yes,
All
we
right.
do.
And so, Sarah, once again, thank you for joining. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Until next time.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. I really hope that you enjoyed that episode. I have been working diligently to bring awareness to career schools. There's so much that they have to offer our students and our community. Every single role within the admissions process is critical, whether you're a part of the admissions team, financial aid, career services, academics, everyone deserves a voice. Admissions is the first point of contact for your school. So you want to ensure that you have a team who exudes confidence, passion, and a clear understanding of effective communication with our potential students. I totally understand the pain of missed class starts, low appointment and enrollment conversions, and this is why I created Next Level Admissions Training by Motivate with K.A.T. This platform is a step-by-step process, and it is going to train your new and tenured advisors in every single step of the enrollment process to ensure that our students are inspired and they're ready and prepared to start class. Admissions is not easy. It can be very challenging, but it's definitely worth it. So if you're ready to take your school to the next level, head on over to lessons.motivatewithkat.com and check out Next Level Admissions.